Great feedback. Let's turn to our second theme this morning that I want to explore, and it's one of many hot topics in med tech and certainly in orthopedics, and that's the medical device excise tax. It's been in the news. We just saw the House of Representatives pass a bill that repeals the medical device excise tax. But as of now, this tax will go into effect in about 6 months, and there's been a substantial amount of debate about this tax. What effect will it have on the industry? Does the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which is an interesting name for that bill, is that going to bring enough patients in to offset that? Over the past year, several of the orthopedic companies have announced layoffs and other restructuring plans that they've indicated that at least in part, they were due to the pending tax. So there's been a lot of banging of the drum of this message. So I want to explore that. Bill Kolter, let's start with you. Biomet's been pretty vocal about this tax being bad for the industry. Why is that?
Well, it's not just bad for the industry. We don't think it's good for the economy writ large, and we just think it's misdirected bad policy. If you look at the pronouncements of the government and the administration, they seem to be promoting the idea that they're interested in economic growth, job growth in well-paying, high-technology industries, and improving the cost-effectiveness of healthcare by promoting the availability of new and innovative treatments that can take cost out of the system. Promotion of small businesses who have great new ideas. And if you wanted to come up with a policy that would target all of that, you would be hard-pressed to come up with something more onerous than the medical device tax. So we think it's off-base, it's misdirected. We think one thing in particular that is of concern for the small businesses is that it's not targeted at profits, but it's targeted at revenue. So if you have a startup medical device company, you have a great new idea, but you're in the stage of research, development, and achieving clearance or approval for the product, and your profits are very slim, this could wipe them out entirely.
So, Bill Plovanic, let me ask you, are the orthopedic companies overreacting here? Is it really that bad, do you think, for industry?
I think it's really bad for industry. You know, this is a very U.S.-dominated industry from a manufacturing standpoint, even a worldwide market share. But I think that, you know, we published a report on this a couple weeks ago. You know, the large companies, they're well positioned, right? They have the ability to restructure, to cut costs, which a lot of them have already done. They'll be able to absorb the tax and to see their earnings grow at the same rate. For the small companies, it's a totally different story. They don't have the ability to lay people off. They run much leaner operations. So when the device tax hits, as it's a revenue tax, it will impact them much harder. And it's most of the smaller companies that I deal with. And when I say small companies, you know, these are companies with, you know, probably 50 to 200, 300, 400 million in revenues, which may be large to some of the folks in the audience. But those are the smaller companies that are still growing, coming up with revolutionary products, you know, evolving, and they're going to be the hardest ones hit.
Yeah. So Brian, you're our U.S. tax expert on the panel.
Absolutely,
is that right?
yeah. Well, I'll pay the U.S. tax. That's as far as it goes.
What's your perspective on this? What are you hearing about it, and what do you think potentially this bodes for smaller companies?
Well, I agree with what's been said, but you know, taxes come and go, and they're political. Government need money; they don't generate it themselves. Quite frankly, I don't get excited. Any business that can't handle a 2% change probably shouldn't be there in the first place. So, you know, we live in a capitalist society. It's just a culling mechanism, survival of the fittest, if you will. So, yes, we should fight it. Yes, we prefer not to have it. But if we have to live and deal with it, just get on with it.
All right. So we'll see. We keep hearing that the Supreme Court's going to rule on this case. So what they're going to say, we certainly don't know. But it certainly seems to me, I personally have to agree with Bill Kolter that it's an incredibly bad piece of public policy in terms of its potential effect. But I also have to agree with Brian. I think, you know, industries, it's not going to be the death of industry. It will survive and go on. I think the losers here aren't so much industry. I think the losers is society and the public at large, quite frankly, over the long
Well, I
haul.
think the biggest threat is probably international competitiveness. You know, that's the major factor, because the world is getting more global. And if you take these regulatory effects and the taxes and you impose them on what the government perceived to be a rich industry, which by any standards it pretty well is, then you get the money locally, but you impact the international competitiveness.